In the meantime, are fears surrounding Bitcoin justified, that it's sort of, to Deirdre's point, such an unknown commodity that to leap into this is obviously not for the faint of heart, but maybe not for the financially wise? To Market Watch's Kathryn Rooney Vera and David Nelson. David, what do you think?
Look, investors have experienced volatility, but it's mostly been to the upside. And I think futures are going to come in here, and they're going to add some validity to this security. Like it or not, Neil, we have a new asset class here. And I think the ones that are worried the most are really central banks and governments, because for the first time they have a currency they can't control. This is a decentralized asset class that exists on computers literally all around the planet, so they can't control that. I think it bothers them. I think it bothers them a lot. Yeah,
we were talking to. It's a very good point there, because we're talking about J.P. Morgan, I believe Morgan Stanley as well, just sort of, circling this sort of critically, but also hedging their bets. And one of the things, Kathryn, comes to mind. This would upset the entire world apple cart here if we have an alternative to established currencies, not the least of which is the U.S. dollar, the ringleader of the world. So that's a big fear, right?
It is, Neil, but also the volatility is intense in this. Let's not forget that Bitcoin started this year under 1,000, and now it broke 17,000. I'll add one thing to what Deirdre mentioned, Neil, and that is that Sunday night, when the futures open, it also opens the opportunity for short selling. Let's not forget that. There's a lot of guys that are going to try to be in front of the short selling of this asset class, or this asset. I mean, there's really no intrinsic value to Bitcoin. So a lot of people see this, as I do, as a massive bubble, probably one of the biggest we've seen in financial history, who will want to get in front of the short selling and be shorting the futures of Bitcoin.
Everyone wants in on a party, I guess, and to taking advantage of that volatility, David, but when people come up to me and they're not even asking about the general market and its run on it, but it's always about Bitcoin, because they want in on this. They see a swing and a downdraft as I'm going to jump in, even when in the course of the hour or 2 hours the stock is exponentially moving. As someone who's very good at these waves, bubbles, whatever you want to call them, some justified, some not, where do you stand on this as a phenomenon that is justified?
Look, I'm going to take the other side of the argument here. Anybody can look at the chart and say that this isn't a bubble. That's clear. It isn't a bubble. But I go back to the dot-com era. We were counting eyeballs back then, and we were counting eyeballs on companies like Amazon, which is today one of the most powerful companies on the planet.
Yeah, but Amazon was an exception, right? Amazon and eBay, some of those were an exception. When you talk about that bubble, the reason why it was called a bubble is the biggest 95+% were bubbles.
Right? I understand that, but the biggest risk here is the initial coin offering. Some of these are bubbles. Some of them are fraud. Some of them are actually Ponzi schemes. It's only as valid as the ecosystem that supports it. Facebook was a social media play. The ecosystem supported it. We used it. Therefore, it became valuable. MySpace was clearly the opposite of that, and then nobody supported that. So there will be busts here, but right now this is something that central banks, governments cannot control, and I think it's a viable entity. I think it's actually a digital check. With checks and balances out there. There are miners out there that are processing these transactions in much the same way that you process a check, except it's not banks and people processing the signature.
Kathryn, what do you think of that we're going to regret the time we sort of delegitimized this or laughed at it or dismissed it because it's real, it's a phenomenon? What do you say?
Right. Neil, I'll add one thing. It's really important that the viewers realize this. 40% of Bitcoin is owned by about 1,000 investors. And information sharing is still legal. So if you get block movement or block trades by what they call them, these whales that hold a ton of Bitcoin, then you're going to see even more volatility, which I will contend that on Sunday night and Monday, when these futures start trading, you're going to get a lot more of it.
But let's say you get a lot more coming in, though, to your point, Kathryn. Doesn't that take away that fear?
Well, Bitcoin is priced on what? It has no intrinsic value, Neil. So it's priced on whatever guys want to pay for it.
You could say that about almost every fiat currency in the world. You could say that about the U.S. dollar. Based on what? It's based on the good faith and credit of the United States.
The U.S. dollar is a reserve currency. It's the sovereign. It's the world's global sovereign reserve currency.
I think we're discounting, Kathryn, respectfully, I think we're discounting it too much. This is something new, and a lot of people really don't understand it. And I was on your side of the fence as little as 3 months ago. And when I started to delve into this, I realized, you know what? There's something going on here.
All right. We'll watch it closely. I want to give. Go ahead. Finish that thought, Kathryn.
No, I think it's important, this underlying blockchain value. Yeah, people have to learn to understand it, but again, I'll mention there is no intrinsic value here, and we've seen a parabolic ascent in Bitcoin,
blockchain is going to change the financial
system. Held by such a small amount of investors that it's I would advise people to be very cautious investing in Bitcoin.
We're going to be clearing trades with blockchain as little as 3 years from now.
All right, we'll watch it closely. That's a bull and bear, or at least the pro or the cautious argument on this. It all seems incredibly fast to me, but it is what it is.